a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. La Llorona. The Mexican folklore, La Llorona is a ghost of a woman who lost her children and now cries while looking for them in the river, often causing misfortune to those who are near, or who hear her. There is no credible source or evidence to the events that inspired the tale/legend of La Llorona. Legend. The Mexican legend goes that in a rural village there lived a young woman named Maria. Maria came from a poor family, but was known around her village for her beauty. One day, an extremely wealthy nobleman traveled through her village. He stopped in his tracks when he saw Maria. Maria was charmed by him and he was charmed by her beauty. So when he proposed to her, she immediately accepted. Maria's family was thrilled that she was marrying into a wealthy family. But the nobleman's father was extremely disappointed that his son was marrying into poverty. Maria and her new husband built a house in the village to be away from his disapproving father. Eventually Maria gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Her husband was always traveling, and stopped spending time with his family. When he came home, he only paid attention to the children, and Maria knew her husband was falling out of love with her. One day, he left and never returned. Years later, as Maria and her twins were walking by a river, she saw a familiar carriage with a younger, beautiful woman next to her husband. Maria was so angry and confused that, without thinking, she picked up her two children and threw them into the river, drowning them. Only after she saw their bodies floating in the river did she realize what she had done, and she then jumped into the river, hoping to die with her children. Now she spends eternity looking for her children around that river. It is said that if you hear her crying, you are to run the opposite way. If you hear her cries, they could bring misfortune or even death. Also, if you are a child, be extra careful, because La Llorona is attracted to children, thinking they are hers. Since she thinks children are hers, she tries to drown them. Children should not walk alone around this river, just in case. Many parents in Mexico and Guatemala use this story to scare their children from staying out too late. At the gates of heaven, she was challenged over the whereabouts of her children, and not permitted to enter the afterlife until she found them. Llorona is forced to wander the earth for all eternity, searching in vain for her drowned offspring. She constantly weeps, hence her name, La Llorona. She is caught between the living world and the spirit world. In some versions of the tale, La Llorona kidnaps wandering children who resemble her missing children, asks them for forgiveness, then kills them to take the place of her own. People who claim to have seen her say she appears at night or in the late evening by rivers or lakes. Some believe those who hear the wails of La Llorona are marked for death, but those who escape in time are not, as in the Gaelic Banshee legend. She is said to cry, a misihos. Other folktales. La Llorona is also sometimes identified with La Malinche, the Nahua woman who served as Cortés' interpreter and mistress, who bore him children and who some say was betrayed by the Spanish conquistadors. In one folk story of La Malinche, she became Hernán Cortés' mistress and bore him a child, only to be abandoned so that he could marry a Spanish lady. Aztec pride drove La Malinche to acts of vengeance. In this context, the tale compares the Spanish discovery of the New World and the demise of indigenous culture after the conquest with La Llorona's loss. The Chumash of Southern California have their own connection to La Llorona. Chumash mythology mentions La Llorona when explaining Nunasis called the Maxilor, or Mamazmis. Mythology says the Chumash believe in both the Nunasis and La Llorona, and specifically hear the Maxilor cry up in the trees. The Maxilor cry is considered an omen of death. The Maxilor is described as looking like a cat with skin of rawhide leather. Outside the Americas, La Llorona bears a resemblance to the ancient Greek tale of the demonic demigoddess Lamia. Hera, Zeus' wife, learned of his affair with Lamia and, out of anger, killed all the children Lamia had with Zeus. Out of jealousy over the loss of her own children, Lamia steals other women's children. In Greek mythology, Medea killed the two children fathered by Jason after he left her for another woman. Author Ben Radford's investigation into the legend of La Llorona, published in Mysterious New Mexico, traced elements of the story back to a German folktale dating from 1486. In popular culture, the plot of the 1961 Mexican film The Curse of the Crying Woman involves the resurrection of the spirit of La Llorona. La Llorona appeared as the monster of the week in the NBC TV series Grimm, in the 9th episode of the second season, which first aired on October 2012. In this storyline, she is a ghost-like creature who appears in different cities at yearly intervals around Halloween, always luring 3 children to a point where 3 rivers meet, attempting to sacrifice these children to regain her own. In the episode, series protagonist Nick Burkhart and his partner Hank Griffin work with Vason detective Valentina Espinosa, who lost her nephew to La Llorona some years ago, and managed to save her latest victims, although La Llorona simply vanishes into the water. La Llorona appeared as the first antagonist in the 2005 pilot episode of the TV series Supernatural. Sarah Shahi portrayed Constance Welch, the woman in white who, after discovering her husband's infidelity, took the lives of her 2 children by drowning them in a bathtub at home, and soon after, took her own by jumping off a bridge into a river. Her ghost was known to haunt the Centennial Highway, hitchhiking unknowing motorists, mostly men, and killing those whom she deemed unfaithful. Main character Sam Winchester destroyed her ghost by crashing his car into the house where she used to live. Finally facing the ghosts of her children, the woman in white was destroyed by her own guilt from killing them. La Llorona briefly appears in the 1973 Mexican film Leyendas Macabras de la Colonia. La Llorona is mentioned and appears in several episodes of El Chavo del Ocho and El Chapulín Colorado, both comic series written by Roberto Gómez Bolaños, aka Espirito. La Llorona appears as the main antagonist of the Mexican animated film La Leyenda de la Llorona. Here, La Llorona is portrayed as a more sympathetic character, with her children's deaths coming as an accident rather than at her own hands. In 1995, Mexican playwright Josefina Lopez wrote Unconquered Spirits, which uses the myth of La Llorona as a plot device. The play has 2 time periods, with Act 1 taking place in 16th century Mexico after Spain occupied it. Here, Lopez takes inspiration from the La Malinche variation, with the heroine represented as a young Aztec girl who is brutally raped by a Spanish friar. She gives birth to twin boys as a result, and drowns them in the river out of protection rather than spite. Act 2 takes place in 1938 amidst the San Antonio pecan shellers strike. A widowed mother who works at the pecan factory has an abortion after being raped by her white supervisor, resulting in a visit from La Llorona to give her the strength to fight back against her attacker. The play is well noted for its sympathetic portrayal of La Llorona as a victim of oppression. In Nancy Farmer's 2002 science fiction novel, The House of the Scorpion, and its 2013 sequel book, The Lord of Opium, the main character, Matt, makes several references to La Llorona, often when retelling the story to other main characters or during self-reflection. La Llorona is mentioned in the 2003 film Chasing Papi starring Sofia Vergara, Rosalind Sanchez, J.C. Velasquez, and Eduardo Verástegui. Her screams can be heard when Thomas is under stress or confronted by the 3 women in his life. La Llorona's image is shown a few times in the film too. The song, She Turned Into Llorona, appears on the 2003 Manic Hispanic album Mijo Goes to Junior College. 2006 Mexican horror film Kilometer 31 is inspired by the legend of La Llorona, and the main evil entity in the film is based on her and her story. La Llorona has also been the theme character of several of Universal Studios' haunted houses during their annual Halloween event, Halloween Horror Nights. The story of La Llorona has been turned into a short comic book story by Love and Rockets writer/artist Gilbert Hernandez. La Llorona is also one of the various names used by Hopi and Terry's punk band in Jaime Hernandez Mechanics series. La Llorona appeared as a ghost in Batwoman in November 2011. La Llorona appears in Josh Walker's 2014 novel, Luke Calls, and The Flower of Chiloé, where the Llorona is the mark of one of Luke's hunts. La Llorona also is a short film which was released in 2015. La Llorona is the basis for the Monster of the Week in the 5th episode of the 2nd season of Sleepy Hollow entitled The Weeping Lady. Morgana, a playable character in League of Legends, has a skin called Ghost Bride. She has different voiceover lines in the Latin American regions, and The Skin was released as a way to celebrate the launch of Latin American servers. The 16th track of the Frida soundtrack is titled La Llorona. It is sung by Chavela Vargas. The 12th track from the self-titled album by the Latino punk band Feo is La Llorona, and is based on the legend, with the cry/lyrics in the chorus of Misijos, Misijos. The song La Llorona is featured in the 2017 Disney Pixar film Coco, sung by Imelda Rivera during the Sunrise concert as she attempts to evade Ernesto de la Cruz, who sings the song in duet with her. In the 2000 sci-fi series, The Invisible Man, Louisiana Llorona is the code name for a chrysalis agent modified to be able to consume large amounts of water and spew them out forcibly and at will. The debut studio album of La Sedacela is called La Llorona. On March 7, 2018, Primero Soy Mexicana by Angela Aguilar was released, on which La Llorona is the 7th track. James Wan and Gary Doberman are producing a film about La Llorona, titled The Curse of La Llorona. It is scheduled to be released on April 19, 2019 by New Line Cinema and Warner Bros. Pictures. The film will be directed by Michael Chavez and star Linda Cardellini, Raymond Cruz, and Patricia Velasquez. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?